Hi, this is Terry again from Historic Ipswich Tours. This morning I'm going to be covering the Ipswich Maritime Trail, and this is a walk put together by the Ipswich Society, and we'll be covering from here, which is Curzon Plain, and taking you down through the Maritime Trail. This area here is Silent Street. This is off of the old cattle market in Ipswich. It's a really pretty area, lots of history. This is the area where most people think Thomas Wolsey was born. We're just going to visit here the Thomas Wolsey statue. Now, this statue here was by David Anand. This was put together in 2011. It occupies a prime position here on Curzon Plain. The location is named after Wolsey's contemporary, who was Lord Curzon, and his house was here where this building stands now. Lord Curzon's grand house stood between Silent Street and Rose Lane, and Rose Lane is just there where the little building is on the corner. That used to be the Rose Inn, and it had this impressive portico that extended out. It had an interior courtyard, and it was very private for Lord Curzon's wife. It had a lovely garden where she and the staff could exercise without having to come out into the street. Wolsey's depicted here, seated and facing south towards the church of St. Peter, and that's just down the end of this road, which we will walk towards. He commandeered St. Peter's. It was St. Peter and St. Paul at the time, and that was going to be the chapel for his unfortunately ill-fated college. And he's seated here, as you can see, teaching from a book with his cat by his side. Now, there is an inscription around the statue. It says born 1470 or 1471, died Leicester 1530, Cardinal, Archbishop, Lord Chancellor and teacher, who believed that pleasure should mingle with study, so that the child may think learning amusement rather than toil. So he had a great attitude towards it. The place that everyone tends to think was the birthplace of Thomas Wolsey is this building here, this rather fine Tudor building on the corner of Silent Street and St. Nicholas Street. It's an ancient building with a carved corner post. It was once used as lodgings for visitors to Curzon House. These included Catherine of Aragon, King Henry VIII, Cardinal Wolsey himself. Curzon Lodge was often referred to as Wolsey's birthplace, as I'd already mentioned, but the plaques that sit outside of here depict exactly what it is. Now, Wolsey's actual birthplace, which has been put forward more recently, is the Black Horse pub, which sits on Black Horse Lane. But he grew up in a butcher's shop, which would have been the site of Cardinal House, which is situated just here, and that's a rather modern building. Now, the building that sat here would have been very similar to Curzon Lodge, so you can see where the confusion would have come from. Thomas Wolsey, a prodigiously talented and conceited man, found favour with Henry VIII, who appointed him Lord Chancellor. He was probably the most important person in England next to the King, giving him enormous power. Wolsey only had recently set up his colleges when he fell from grace, and he was dismantled along with the college he started to build, which leaves only the gate in College Street, which we will visit on this trip. Now, this rather handsome building here is the Sailor's Rest, and this sits on the corner of Cutler Street and St Peter's Street. Today it is a beauty salon, but in the late 1960s it was threatened with demolition until members of the Ipswich Society challenged that demolition. It's an older timber-framed building, and it was encased in brickwork during the reign of William and Mary. Lots of people have asked, has it been a pub? What was its pub name? It's never actually been a pub. The neighbouring modern building here used to be a car showroom. That was demolished and the new one put up. Now, as you can see from above the doorway, it says the Sailor's Rest, and that was precisely its job. If you take a look at the plaque on the wall, it says it's a unique William and Mary house used by British and foreign sailors, and it basically was a sailor's rest. Now, St Peter's Street is a beautiful street. It's very quaint. It's one of those that's literally stuck in time. And if you have a look at the properties along here, on this side, all of these buildings are Grade 2 listed. This is the Thomas Wolsey pub, and there are some very nice, fine, independent shops, and all set in Grade 2 listed buildings, and it is like stepping back in time. Whereas on this side of the road, they are all much more recent, and when I say recent, I mean less than 1500s. So I'll just pan round so we can have a look back down the street, and you can see what a really lovely street this is. And you can see St Peter's Church there in the distance. And as I said, we are following the Ipswich Maritime Trail. So that will, of course, include St Peter's Church. Now, looking from this angle before we cross, St Peter's Church, it's medieval. It's one of our 12 medieval churches in the town. Architect was George Gilbert Scott. And it was reconstructed in the 1870s. The magnificent tower dominates the adjacent roundabout. And it does stand tall over St Peter's Street. We're going to cross the road. The roundabout being there, now that the traffic has moved, you can see where St Peter's sits. Now a redundant church, St Peter's is used within the community as an exhibition and music venue. And it's open from Tuesday to Friday. Now this church houses some great artefacts. It has the Ipswich Charter hangings, which are a magnificent work of art, definitely worth stepping in to see. And it also has the sarcophagus of one of the very first monks at this chapel. Right, we'll continue on. Now, directly opposite St Peter's is this house here, which is Benet Aldred's house. Now, once left to rack and ruin for about 20 years, it has now been taken over by Ipswich Borough Council, and they've done a fantastic job of its renovation. And Benet Aldred was, of course, a merchant. Another property that people often ask, was this a pub? No, never a pub. We're going to come along now College Street and visit Wolsey's Gate. Now right here would have been where the river was, because the river was a lot closer at the time. And this handsome structure here in the shadow of the church, as you can see, is Wolsey's Gate. And this would have been called the Watergate, having the water so much closer, so those arriving from London would have stepped off here. Now, not such a prestigious place, because it has thousands of cars going past every single day, and I doubt many people take any notice of it. Unfortunately, the sign, which I really do wish the Borough Council would either cover or recarve so we can see exactly what it says. And there, the crest of Henry VIII. Now, I'm going to walk down just because it is so busy here. I'm not even going to attempt to cross, and it is only 6:30 in the morning, so you can see the volume of traffic. And if I get a clear spot, I might be able to cross. Okay. Right here, we are on Foundry Lane. Now this is very historic because this would have been the main route into Ipswich from the south on Worsted Road, which became Great Whip Street, which still exists. And this is where the fording point would have come across the river, because this is the narrowest part of the river. The line continues south across the modern gyratory system on Turret Lane, which is behind us. The question has always been, was this a Roman road? And there's no evidence to that. But it was a ford in use by the Anglo-Saxons from around AD 600. Eventually it was supplemented by a wooden bridge, and unfortunately that bridge was swept away, and then that was replaced by another bridge, and this here is Stoke Bridge. It's an actually beautiful setting, and this is the River Orwell, and it can actually be reasonably claimed that this point is the nucleus of the Anglo-Saxon settlement. The first Saxon town, and that was called Ipswich. And this was the crucible of English language. The lane that we just came down, Foundry Lane, was used in the early 19th century following the opening of the engineering company E.R.&F. Turner in 1837. And this was one of many engineering firms that came to Ipswich and made it famous. And now it's quite a nondescript little road. Now if we follow this road round, we're going to come up to the Edward Fyson building, and that's that rather pinky terracotta building there on the right, of course now empty, and it does have a ghost sign, like many of our historic industrial buildings. Now you can see the ghost sign over there on the building. In its early years it was used as an infantry barracks, but in 1849 it became one of many buildings in the town to be converted into a malting. And it's on a lovely setting, and as you can imagine, very accessible. I mean, if you notice over there, the bank seems to be crumbling and it's been replaced by sandbags. The lettering on the brickwork on this east end of the premises suggests that as a malting, it was owned and operated by Edward Fyson, one of the first British companies to produce malted barley. Certainly looks beautiful at this time of the morning. Now, James Fyson joined Edward Packard in the manufacture of fertiliser in Ipswich, and I think that Fyson is more well known for his fertiliser than he was for malting barley. We're going to continue down this road here as part of the trail, and this is Wet Dock Island. This vista opens up onto the Northern Quays. And you can see the many tower blocks that have now arisen here. I'm going to just pan round so you can see the history here. I do another walk just on the historical industry buildings along the quayside, and that will be coming soon. So all these buildings that are now occupied, some have had to be replaced because they were not repairable, all had their own rich industrial heritage. Now, this commanding viewpoint is not just of the mighty Northern Quays, but of the muscular Genesis projects to the south of Newcut, South Quay, and all that filling the skyline. Just over to the right, you can see the tops of the kilns of Phelon Maltings. Phelon Maltings I also cover on my industrial Ipswich buildings tour. Now, down here is the restaurant called The Last Anchor. Restaurant and bar directly opposite the old custom house, and the old custom house is in view over there. We'll be visiting that shortly. At the end of the quay, the corner of the walk, what is perceptible is a softer, greener Ipswich. The town is a bowl, surrounded by trees on higher ground. This is our more county town. This is our industrial area. If we go further down, we will come to the lock, and you'll be able to see the quay buildings, the university opposite. And of course, the public warehouse, which was constructed in 1881 by William Whitford and Co. And that actually survives today. Now, the lock, I don't know if we'll be able to see it from this side, but we'll certainly take a look to see if we can. That's the Prince Philip Lock at the southern end, and it's part of the enclosed dock. And adjacent to it are two enormous, redundant blue Babcock cranes. And like many of the dock areas now, that just stands. And it's part of the heritage, and it just shows you what was actually here. The lock is a complicated and restricted area, and it has the locally made Ransom and Rapier swing bridge, as well as the recently installed lock gates. We'll continue round, taking a look at some of these fabulous buildings. I'm a real fan of the industrial heritage, and I'm hoping that they really are able to repurpose these buildings. We have R.W. Paul on the end there, next to it Burton's, and then of course we have the mill standing empty due to its controversy, and then we have the Cranfields buildings. Really is nice to be here at this time in the morning. Not so many people around, and you get to see the buildings in all their glory. This is a new restaurant that's just opened up, Marinero Lounge. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And we're going to continue down Albion Wharf. First, take a look at this. Absolutely fantastic. I know these buildings are filled with ghosts of the past, but they are fantastic. I mean, you couldn't replicate all of this. Look at all of this on this building. Just fantastic. And to think that this was all once hustle and bustle, filled with ships and wherries. Now, just while I'm here, just going to point out the 24/7 Ipswich Maritime Trust Living Museum window. It changes regularly and always has a story about Ipswich. So you can come here at any time and walk along. Today, a busy marina, totally different life from the one it originally had. And to think this was the biggest, busiest port in England. And of course, Ipswich Container Port could handle the much bigger vessels that were coming into town. The oil was continually getting silted up because of the changing tides, constantly had to be dredged, which is why the lock was put into place to try and stop that, to keep the water level high, because the ships were getting stuck. But eventually, of course, it outlived its purpose, and the newer structure was built. I'm going to stop here and turn and let you absorb all its glory. It is beautiful. Absolutely love this town. Of course, all the buildings across there, dwarfing the Thyssen building there on the right. They're all new, and further across there is Phelon Maltings in the distance. You can see the chimneys from the kiln, and from this vantage point, the last anchor there between the boats. Lots of work being done along here. The businesses are still open, not looking as inviting, of course, with all of its scaffolding, but much needed work being done. Got the grazing sheep and the Pizza Express there, and looking out across the quay there to the university. Right in front of us here is the beautiful, prestigious Customs House. Before we visit that, we're just going to go over and look at this little building over here, being dwarfed by the Premier Inn. This is the Old Bull Inn, and it's sitting in busy Quay Street, which is an extension of College Street. As I get to the end, I'll show you where we came from, which was by Wolsey Gate. Have to excuse the traffic noise. The closer we get to 8 o'clock, the busier it will get. Now, the Old Bull Inn here is a timber frame Tudor building with a 19th century frontage. When it was a working inn, the coach entrance led to the great stable yard, and that would have been the coach entrance right there. And that would have had a blacksmith's and a wheelwright. You can see through the gate. I'll see if I can zoom in so that you can see through the gate. You can actually see where those buildings would have been. There was a building next door, the lower part of the Premier Inn, and in World War I, a Zeppelin delivered a bomb that destroyed the roof and the house next door, unfortunately killing somebody. Now, there is a plaque on the side of this building, and while the road is quiet, I want to cross over so that you can see it. And it does say Ipswich, Maritime Ipswich, former Bull Inn, timber framed Tudor house with early 19th century frontage. Okay, we'll cross back over. This is the rear of the Custom House, Actually, we have roadworks here, so it's nice that I can actually cross the road. So this is the rear of the Custom House. Not many people get to see this part. The blue doors, of course, were used by the police. It also has this beautiful clock tower, which again, not very many people get to see. This Custom House is actually remarkably original. I'm going to go over this side of the road so you can see more of it. This being the side, and you can see it has the structural ties, also painted blue. The doors on the side would have been used by the police. It's now used by Associated British Ports. Of course, no longer a Custom House. The blue doors, this side leading into the cells. These doors below would have been for the bonded warehouse. Now we'll come around to the front, and this is where things get really interesting. It is quite a handsome building, as you can see. It was designed by a gentleman called J.M. Clark, and it was opened in 1845. The original Custom House built on this site was actually a wooden structure, and I have a artist depiction of that, so I'll include that. Now if you have a look up at the top, you can see the beautifully carved town crest with seahorses either side. And it has its conical entrance. Unfortunately, this is no longer open to the public, but, and I say but, it will be open in the middle of September when we have our Heritage Open Days. You can only go into the lower part of the building, you cannot go to the upper part because that is secure office space. Has some very interesting features. Just have a look at the plaque here. Opened by Her Majesty on her Golden Jubilee. Now, we didn't think that this building had any writing on it, but it does actually have a couple of high water markers, and we have one here and one at the other end of the building, and I think they were put there because of the fluctuating tides, but the lock was already in place, so that wouldn't have taken place anymore. And of course the drinking fountain that's never been usable. I guess when they put it in, it was designed to be used, but never was. And I'll just, while I'm here, just show you Victor. Victor is always docked here. He is a red sail barge, an original, probably Thames sailing barge. They get their name from their red sails, which is kind of an ochre colour because they used fish oil and ochre to preserve the sails. You can actually go out on day trips with Victor. And of course, just in the distance there, not to be forgotten, is the Orwell Lady, and that will take you on trips around the harbour. So there are always things here for people to do. I'm going to continue on down. So this remarkable wet dock was opened in 1842. Henry Palmer was appointed as the newly created Dock Commission in 1837, and that was to cut off a portion of the existing river, as I'd already mentioned. This building here is Waterfront House. Again, I cover this on the Industrial Heritage Walk and tell you a little bit more about it. It was once owned and opened by Cont Ship. Have to be careful how you pronounce that. Then it was taken over by Ashton's Legal. They have now moved out, and it's now sitting empty. It does have a person interested who wanted to invest and open it up as a living museum, but as yet we haven't seen anything happening. But it is a listed building, so whoever's putting money into it is going to need very deep pockets. And as we come along here, we have the Henry Palmer warehouse, which is now being used as the bistro on the quay. The glass fronted piece in the middle there would have been used as the access to the yard. It does have a plaque. Let's go and see this. And it does actually identify the warehouse being designed by Henry Palmer. Okay, we'll continue along. We're just coming along here now to Wherry Lane. Narrow lane, cut through. These are the Isaac Lord buildings. Going to cross back over so you can see it in all its glory. These are a variety of buildings, a complex actually, and it's also one of the finest examples of a merchant's trading business in this country. So there's something to be said, and it's here on our little old waterfront. You can see the kiln above, and this was run by the Cobbolds as well. The house sat on 4th Street. And this would have been with the access to the dock. Now, the side here is being used by the Salthouse Harbour Hotel. But if we go round to the front of the buildings, if you have a look through, there would have been a set of gates at the end there where you see that coach. And that would have had the merchant's name on there. Now, trading took place here on this site, dating back to the middle 15th century. Now it's used as a wedding venue. The crossway, the 17th century timber framing with early 18th century herringbone brick infill can be seen on the main warehouse, and I'll just go around the back down Wherry Lane and show you the rear of the building, which is actually quite spectacular because it really is a fine example. Water looks absolutely spectacular this morning, it's like a mirror. These would have once been warehouses, but they're now used as art studios. This is original. They've kept the original doors. I don't know if we'll be able to see everything I want to show you because of the deliveries. But if you take a look at that brickwork, it's just fantastic. It's a really, really lovely complex. The pitched gables that you see are part of the house that belonged to Cobbold. And we'll be visiting that on our way round. Coming back out again onto the quay, and we'll see the Salt House Harbour Hotel ahead of us. Once home to BOCM, British Oil and Cake Mills. You can see underneath the orange writing here, which has been painted over several times. There would have been, on the left-hand side, a sign for George Mason, who was the owner of the building, and then they would have had British Oil and Cake Mills on the third level down, I believe. This has had an extension at the top. That wasn't on the original building. That's to make way for more hotel space. There was another building here, and that unfortunately was demolished. It's in the same shape. I'm sure that the planners would have insisted on that. It's in the same shape, has that same entranceway that it would have done when George Mason owned it, but now beautifully glass fronted and used for the hotel. And of course all of these condominiums overlooking the quay. It's a lovely vista to wake up to each morning. And down to the University of Suffolk. This is called University Plaza, and it's the university campus, and it actually became the University of Suffolk in 2017. The heart of the university is, of course, this waterfront building, and that was designed by architects RMJM in 2007. It has 6 stories, and it's got this lovely sweeping curve to the height of the Tudor buildings as it goes round. And of course in the middle, very fitting for a university, is the giant question mark. Made of black basalt and white marble. Question mark being whatever you want it to be. We're going to continue down to Coprolite Street. Coprolites, of course, being fossilised animal dung. And Coprolite Street would have been the site of the very early fertiliser factory. Phosphate nodules were quarried on the east of Ipswich and were used as early chemical fertiliser. Pioneer in the field, Edward Packard, and again the university building. Again, given its importance, it's a rather nondescript little street. We're going to go on the south side of 4th Street, look at numbers 132 to 138. The road ahead of us, of course, being Duke Street. We'll follow the road around. This would have been a very busy yet very poverty-stricken area back in the day. This is Fore Hamlet and Back Hamlet, and this would have been part of the rope area. And a pottery. These fabulous buildings along here have one of the longest Bressumer beams. And you can see the date right there of 1620. These buildings, now as shops, would be used by students, and across the way 2 redundant churches, and again more of the university campus, which would have been part of the Rope Walk campus right there. And again the question mark. Some slightly newer buildings on this side, and I emphasise the word slightly, and obviously the new complex of housing here on the left. This is a very busy intersection. We are only at 7:30 in the morning, so you can imagine the volume of traffic as the town gets busier and people are setting off to work. This is Neptune Square, which was built in the early 2000s. These are the buildings that look out over the quay. And again, looking down here, this is Grimwade Street, used to be called Borough Road. Now we're going to come along to the Neptune Inn. This building here used to be a cafe. It's now changed hands and is a noodle bar. Has a blue plaque above to Edith Maud Cook, first woman pilot in Britain. Now this is the old Neptune Inn. This is a fabulous building. '16th century, has been refronted. Now this building doesn't look as large as it is, but it goes quite a way back. There's 13 bedrooms in this building. It has a beautiful courtyard at the rear. It was once a pub and then became an unofficial pub, and eventually in the 1930s it gave up its licence. Some great stories of this building. Being a dockside pub, of course, lots of people would have stayed here. I'm going to hop across the road just because I want to give you a better view, and you can see how big it is, and it just sits here on 4th Street. It's now open as an Airbnb. I have been round, it's absolutely fantastic inside. Has its own private courtyard onto the docks, and if you go down the alley at the side, you can go round to its dockyard, its courtyard, sorry. Now here would have been where the home of Thomas Eldred would have lived. Along here, got some beautiful glass on here, the original glass on the building. Thomas Eldred's house has now been demolished. Now here is the Isaac Lord's merchant's house, and if you recall the gates that I mentioned at the end of the alley by the coach, they would have been there, and there would have been the company name on the gates. Again, apologise for all the traffic, there's not much I can do about it. But this would have been Isaac Lord's merchant's house. This is also let as an Airbnb. So this would have been his home and his business. As you can see, the big complex that sits behind his business would have been at the bank. Now they own all of this complex, all of Isaac Lord's complex. Now the frontage does bear a date on the upper Bessemer of 1636. If you can see that just above the window, I appreciate we are far away. Try and zoom in so you can see it. Now, dendrochronology has been done and it puts the timbers at around 1430. We are now coming up to the Lord Nelson pub. I'm just going to, so you get your bearings, turn around and you can see St Clement's Church and again 4th Street where we've just come from. And this is the Lord Nelson pub. It's a mixture of old and new on this building. I'm going to cross over so that I can show you the Lord Nelson in all its glory. Now you can see the difference where the roof of the timber frame section has been raised at some point. The pub may have been renamed when Lord Nelson was appointed High Sheriff of Ipswich in 1801. Now the glazed brickwork at the bottom here would have been as a defence because of the flooding that would have come up from the waterfront. So you can see that glazed brickwork there along the front of the building, and of course having a look at the beautiful timbers along there on the eaves. And for those of you who don't realise where the words eavesdropping comes from, it's exactly that. People standing under the eaves because people lived above their stores, and that wouldn't have been enclosed, that would have been very much open, so they would have stood and listened to a bit of tittle-tattle. Thomas Eldred's house would have been along here, opposite Isaac Lord's merchant's house, now a gap in the landscape, of course. Thomas Eldred, famous because he sailed with Cavendish on the second circumnavigation of the globe. We're retracing our footsteps here, and we're going to go past the captain's houses, which is said to have one of the largest Bessemer beams in the country. And they are just over there on the right. The date 1631 appears on the Bessemer beam, and you can see the length of the beam. It goes right along, slightly curving upwards at the end. It also has the initials RS, and that's for Captain Robert Sansom. Again, apologies for the traffic noise. This is our town. It's very busy. This would have been the parochial hall, currently now used as a gym, and this would have been the vicarage. We're now in St Clement's Church Lane. It'll be slightly quieter now that we've come into here. This is St Clement's Church. This is the Sailors' Church. I have done very many videos and included St Clement's Church. It's one of the luckier churchyards, considering it's sitting on the Star Lane gyratory system. It's maintained its beautiful churchyard. The church has 2 anchors as a feature, and they are in its stonework. And there's also a memorial to Sir Thomas Slade. Slade, famous for designing Nelson's flagship. The seagulls have been busy again, pulling all the stuff out of the bins. And here is the memorial for Thomas Slade. This church was known as the Cobbold Church because the Cobbolds put lots of funds into it. That was the thing back in the day. People had benefactors and they relied on those benefactors to put money into the church. There's lots of Cobbold memorials in here, and they of course contributed to these beautiful Victorian baths here. Entrance to the Lord Nelson. Now this is one of the earliest public baths, and it is still open to the public. It opened in 1894, and that was thanks to Felix Thornley Cobbold. There are so many Cobbolds, it is really hard to keep track of who did what. They all done such great work, and as you can see, we've come right round the block and we are back on the corner where the Lord Nelson is. Now here along Fore Street were very many merchants' houses, and right here where you can see is the tattoo parlour, which would be the 3rd building in from your left. That would have been a pork butcher's. Apparently so popular were Herbert's sausages that people queued right down the street. It is a lovely street, and unfortunately it's been kind of sliced in half by Salthouse Street and Star Lane. Angel Lane, very different to what it once was. And along here we do have another blue plaque. At number 44, and that bears the plaque for Cor Visser, and he was a Dutch artist, and apparently still has family living in this building. Out of Time Records. If you're looking for vinyl, fantastic place to go. And of course, the post office. The post office was formerly the Dog and Gun pub. I'm going to turn around so you can actually see it. This was the Dog and Gun pub. Going to cross the road at the traffic lights and go down and have a look at the grey building in the distance there, which was the old Wheatsheaf pub, all still part of the Ipswich Maritime Trail. Going to cross the road so you can always get the best view of these buildings. The Wheatsheaf, or what was the Wheatsheaf, sits here at number 24 Fore Street, and this is an excellent example of a timber framed building. It's very much like the ancient house in the town centre, and it also sports Ipswich windows. There's 3 of them. They have the oriel or bay windows, as they're known, on the upper floors with the 3 gables. And it was a former merchant's house and then turned into a public house. I'm going to highlight the Ipswich window so that if you come to Ipswich, you'll be able to look in the town to see who else is sporting them. Of course, this one and the ancient house. Slightly quieter along here, also very rich history. I'm going to pop through to Blackfriars Dominican Friary. Close the road for some reason, always seem to be digging something up. Some fantastic Tudor buildings along here. And this is Blackfriars Court. This is part of Lower Orwell Street, as you can see, that goes down. Now, there were 5 powerful religious houses in Ipswich between the 13th and 16th century. St Peter and Paul, close to the river crossing, Holy Trinity in Christchurch Park, the Grey Friars, which was close to St Nicholas, where White Friars, which was close to the Butter Market. Now, the only visible signs are the ruins here at the Blackfriars Church, and that's here. And this stands between Lower Orwell Street and Foundation Street. And those are local Septera stones. They do have these informative plaques here. We owe all of this excavation here to a lady called Nina Layard. And of course, because she was a woman, she wasn't fully recognised. although she did some fantastic work. And she has also written a book about the 12 Suffolk martyrs, and was also responsible for the memorial to those that stands in Christchurch Park. Now there is a plaque for Nina Layard, and it looks as though someone has tried to deface it. But she was a very important figure in this area. We're going to continue down to the Tooley and Smart almshouses. Now these are very close to the Blackfriars Dominican Friary. These were originally built in 1550 and named after the wealthy Tudor merchant Henry Tooley, and they were added to by William Smart. Across from them is this beautiful Georgian house, and it bears the plaque for Thomas Gainsborough, painter. He didn't actually live in this house, he lived in an identical house which would have been situated here. And that has now been replaced by flats. I do believe they were actually an office building at one point, so we'll have a look at the plaque and the new plaque underneath for Birkin-Haywood, pioneering, award-winning architect, painter and authority on churches and stained glass. Worked here from 1950 to 1982. That was recently put up. We're now going to walk down to St Mary at Quay Church. And this is Smart Street, and you can see the other side of the almshouses right here, and the building on this side would have been part of the old school. I do believe it's still used as a night school at the moment. St Mary at Quay Church was known as the Waterfront Church, and that was founded on a legacy bequeathed in 1448. This also has a very interesting history, and again another one of our 12 medieval churches of Ipswich, of which I have also done a walk. This became the church for the congregation that were displaced from St Peter and St Paul when Wolsey took over that church, and the parishioners came here to St Mary Quay. And of course, just like Wolsey Gate, the church was also very close to the water. The church is now occupied again, which is lovely to see. Sadly, it has no stained glass, because the stained glass was put out by a Luftwaffe bomb that hit close by, so it was never replaced. The church has undergone quite a lot of restorative work in the basement. They filled the crypts with concrete to stop it from subsiding because it was starting to lean. Please do have a look at the medieval church walk to get a little bit more information on the church. This church first built to take in the advantaged and the disadvantaged, which to me is the purpose of a church, isn't it? It has a key symbol on the roof. When we come back here, I will show it to you. The key is the weather vane. At the top, I don't know how much detail you'd be able to see. I do have photographs of this. Now that key weather vane up there is 5 feet, although it is hard to imagine that when you're looking up at it right now. This also was home to the Thule Brass. This was Thule's church, and of course Thule's almshouses being down the street, Foundation Street, just across the way there. And as you can see, it would have been a short walk, Thule being a benefactor. Now this church being our last visit, this would be the end of our Ipswich Maritime trail this morning. If you enjoyed this and you would like to do this walk for yourself, you can purchase the booklet. I will highlight the booklet. You can purchase the booklet from the Ipswich Society. They will mail it to you for £5, and you can walk this fabulous town and see everything it has to offer, taking into account that Ipswich is the oldest continuously occupied town in England. That's not to be discounted. That's actually a very good fact. I'm going to pan round to show you where we came from. This is very much a circular walk ending at St Mary Quay. So if you were coming into town by car, you could park at Cromwell Square car park. From there you would be able to see where we started at Curzon Plain and do the whole trail and finish at St Mary Quay Church. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again on another walk. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That way you'll be notified of any new walks.